On our wedding anniversary, I walked in on my wife and my boss in our bathroom. Faced with their mockery and betrayal, I didn't scream. I just smiled. With a meat cleaver in my hand and the click of a deadbolt, the pushover husband they knew was gone, replaced by a monster. When our French door refrigerator became my boss's only sanctuary, the 0-degree punishment was just the appetizer. This little party I was throwing would completely upend their lives and teach them the true meaning of despair. Crack boom! A jagged white slash of lightning tore open the night sky, followed instantly by a rolling clap of thunder that sounded like it was right outside the window. Today was our 3rd wedding anniversary. I'd taken a half-day off work, braving a once-in-a-decade thunderstorm to get home early. In one hand, I carried a cake from her favorite bakery. In my coat pocket was the new necklace I'd bought her. I kept picturing the surprised look on her face. I never imagined she'd give me a surprise of her own. The moment I opened the front door, a mixture of unfamiliar cologne and the damp, earthy smell of rain hit me. In the entryway, a pair of expensive men's leather shoes that weren't mine were casually tossed aside. Their soles were caked with the night's mud, leaving filthy tracks on the hardwood floors I had just cleaned 2 days ago. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The cake slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a sickening splat. Cream and strawberries spattered everywhere, looking like a pool of vomit. From the direction of the master bedroom, I heard the sound of the shower running, mixed with a woman's suppressed, breathless moans. Then came a greasy voice, one I knew all too well, one I now wanted to carve into pieces. "Come on, baby, get a little wilder. What are you afraid of? That pushover husband of yours is probably still slaving away at the office, killing himself for that pathetic paycheck." Pushover husband? Me? Barefoot, I walked across the cold floor, each step feeling like I was treading on broken glass. That voice belonged to my direct supervisor, Department Manager Mark Thompson. The same Mark who was always clapping me on the shoulder, calling me buddy, while stabbing me in the back and stealing credit for my work. So, I wasn't just a chump at the office. At home, I was the guy getting played for a fool. My hand was trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt white hot. As I passed the kitchen, my hand instinctively reached out and grabbed the heaviest tool from the knife block, the meat cleaver. The cold, solid weight of the steel instantly calmed my boiling mind. That's right. Stay calm. A surprise? I'd give them a surprise, all right. The bedroom door was ajar. Through the frosted glass of the shower door, steam billowed, blurring the two figures tangled together inside like a pair of shameless maggots. Without making a sound, I walked to the bathroom door. Then I shoved it open with all my force. A shriek tore through the humid, lust-filled air. Through the steam, my beautiful, stone-cold wife, Chloe, and the fleshy mass of Mark Thompson froze like two deer in the headlights. Mark still had a sleazy grin plastered on his face. When his eyes focused on me, standing in the doorway, cleaver in hand, my expression like death itself, his grin twisted into a mask of pure terror. "Ethan, what are you? How are you home?" he shrieked, scrambling to climb out of the tub. But the soap and water were the perfect trap. His foot slipped, and his heavy body slammed onto the wet tile. He landed flat on his back, flailing like a pig scalded with boiling water. "Ethan, let me explain. It's not what you think." Chloe finally snapped out of it. She grabbed a towel to wrap around herself, sobbing hysterically as she tried to crawl toward me. "Not what I think. What exactly did I think? That you were screwing in the bed I bought, that you were getting it on in the shower I use every morning." My lips pulled back into a smile that was more hideous than a sob. As I watched in horror, I reached for the door lock. Click! I just turned this small, steamy bathroom into a cage. "What were you doing?" "Ethan, don't be crazy. Murder is a felony." Mark shoved himself backward with his hands and feet, his fat smearing a trail on the floor. His eyes were glued to the meat cleaver in my hand. I walked toward him, the polished edge of the cleaver glinting under the bathroom lights. I crouched down and gently pressed the tip against his thigh, which was trembling violently. The cold touch made him flinch, and a foul stench filled the air. He'd pissed himself. "A felony? Mark, when you were in my house, screwing my wife, did you think about felonies?" I whispered, my voice as gentle as a lover's. "You were climbing pretty fast a minute ago, weren't you?" I drew the tip of the cleaver across his leg, just enough to open a thin red line. "Aghhhh," he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. "Do it again," my smile widened. "Climb for me one more time." Another crash of thunder boomed outside, perfectly drowning out his pathetic screams and Chloe's desperate pleas. I enjoyed the show, him scrambling on the floor like a dog, Chloe's pretty face contorted by terror and despair. This was the woman I'd loved for 3 years. This was the boss I'd treated like a friend. What a pair of scumbags. Half an hour later, I dragged a hoarse, limp Mark out of the bathroom. Chloe was a shell, huddled in a corner, shaking uncontrollably. I threw Mark onto the living room floor. He was naked, his body covered in angry red welts and purple bruises from where I'd used the flat of the cleaver. "Ethan, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please, just let me go. I'll give you whatever you want, any amount of money." He gasped, lying on the floor like a dying fish. "Money." I let out a cold laugh, my eyes sweeping over the home I'd built. Our wedding photo was still on the wall, Chloe smiling beautifully, nestled against my side. How ironic. My gaze finally landed on the massive French door refrigerator in the corner. I'd stretched our budget to buy it so Chloe could stock all her expensive organic groceries and fancy snacks. A brilliant idea began to form. "Mark, didn't you say you needed to cool off?" I said with a smile, walking over and pulling open the freezer door. A blast of 0-degree air rushed out, instantly dropping the temperature in the room. Mark seemed to guess what was coming. The color drained from his face, his eyes wide with terror. "No, don't! Ethan, you can't do this. You'll kill me." "Kill you? Of course not," I said, prying his fingers from the floor one by one. In the face of my overwhelming rage, his strength was nothing. "I just think this would be the perfect sanctuary for you tonight." I dragged him like a sack of garbage, forcing all 200 pounds of him toward the freezer. He thrashed and screamed, his hands clawing at the door, his feet kicking at the floor. "Chloe, help me. For God's sake, help me," he cried out to the baby he'd been whispering sweet nothings to just an hour earlier. Chloe shot back to reality, scrambling over to grab my leg. "Ethan, no. Please, this is going too far. Don't ruin your life over people like us." Ruin my life. My life was already ruined the moment I opened that door. I kicked her away and, with a final surge of adrenaline, shoved the last of Mark's struggling body into the freezer compartment. His fat body was curled into a fetal position in the cramped space, like a hog ready for slaughter. Slam! I shut the door hard, and the world went quiet. All that was left was the low hum of the refrigerator's compressor, a perfect soundtrack for a countdown to oblivion. I walked over to the collapsed form of Chloe, crouched down, and gently lifted her tear-stained face with my finger. "Don't worry," I said with a smile that held no warmth. "His surprise is over. Now it's your turn." Faintly, I could hear a muffled thump-thump from inside the fridge, but the sounds quickly grew weaker, then stopped altogether. After all, 0 degrees is the perfect temperature to help a man clear his head. The hum of the refrigerator was like a ticking clock, each pulse hammering away in the dead silence of the living room. Chloe knelt on the floor, the towel wrapped around her body, shaking like a leaf in an autumn wind. She looked up, her face a mess of tears and snot, all traces of her usual polished arrogance gone. Her eyes were wide with a terror and unfamiliarity, as if she were looking at a demon who had just clawed its way out of hell. "Ethan, please, let him out. I'm begging you." Her voice was a hoarse, trembling whisper. "We can get a divorce. I won't take anything. I'll walk away with nothing. Just please, don't do something you'll regret." Regret? I laughed. The dumbest thing I ever did in my life was marry her. Ignoring her, I walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid swirled, reflecting my cold, crazed expression. A divorce? I took a sip. The burn in my throat felt incredibly grounding. "Oh, we're getting one. Just not yet." I walked to the refrigerator, admiring the giant white coffin. I could only imagine Mark's desperation inside. The initial frantic struggles, the biting cold seeping into his bones, his limbs going numb, his consciousness fading. This was so much more interesting than just killing him. "You know, Chloe," I said, turning back to her, "I really thought I was the luckiest man alive. I had a beautiful wife, a stable job. I worked my ass off, took every overtime shift, just to give you a better life. I gave you my debit card and only kept a couple $100 a month for myself. You said you wanted a bigger house, so I started secretly studying the stock market, trying to grow our savings. My voice was flat, as if I were telling someone else's story. Chloe started shaking even more violently. And what did you call me? A pushover husband. I walked over and crouched in front of her, holding the glass to her lips. Here, have a drink. It'll warm you up. She shook her head in terror, her lips trembling too much to speak. I grabbed her chin and forced the cold whiskey down her throat. She choked and coughed, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? I stroked her damp hair, my touch gentle, but my words like ice. The game is just getting started. The minutes ticked by. After about 40 minutes, I figured he'd had enough. Any longer and he might actually die, and that would spoil the fun. I strolled over and opened the freezer door. A semi-frozen, purplish human form tumbled out and landed with a heavy thud on the floor. A thin layer of white frost covered Mark's body. His lips were blue, his eyes were bulging, and his body was convulsing uncontrollably. He opened his mouth, but only a wheezing, gasping sound came out. See? All cooled off now, right? I said with a smile to Chloe. I dragged him like a sack of trash into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and blasted his rigid body with cold water. Cold water. The moment the icy spray hit him, Mark's body went into violent spasms. The shock of going from extreme cold to just plain freezing, but not warmth, was a special kind of torture. He finally regained a sliver of consciousness, a low moan escaping his throat. I hauled him back into the living room and tossed his muddy clothes at his face. Get dressed and get out. Shaking violently, it took him almost 15 minutes to clumsily pull his clothes on. He didn't dare look at me once. His eyes held nothing but a deep, primal fear. Chloe crawled over to help him, but he shoved her away. Don't touch me. Mark shrieked in terror. Seeing them turn on each other, the smile on my face grew wider. Get lost, Mark, I said. Granted a pardon, Mark scrambled for the door, not even bothering to put his shoes on correctly. Wait, I said suddenly. His body went rigid. Slowly, filled with an all-consuming dread, he turned around. I held up my phone. On the screen, a video was playing. It showed him the bathroom, a pathetic, blubbering mess, followed by his desperate, screaming pleas as I stuffed him into the freezer. The video was crystal clear, the audio perfect. Ethan, you. His face went from white to green. Don't get the wrong idea, I said with a harmless-looking smile. I just thought a moment this precious deserved to be saved. Wouldn't you agree, my dear boss? My gaze shifted from him to Chloe. What do you two think would happen if I sent this video, along with some of the enthusiastic audio from your little session in my bathroom, to the company-wide group chat? Or maybe I could just send it directly to your wife. I knew about Mark's wife, Sharon. She was famous for being a shark, and her family was very influential. Mark owed his manager position almost entirely to her connections. Mark's face turned the color of ash. He knew that if this got out, he wouldn't just lose his job and reputation. His wife would eat him alive. What do you want? He asked, his voice raspy. It's simple. I held up 3 fingers. First, you resign. Effective immediately. The reason can be personal health issues. Second, that new BMW X5 you've been bragging about. I like it. Have the title transferred to my name by tomorrow. And third, and most importantly, I paused, then said each word with chilling clarity. From this day forward, I never want to see you again. If I do, I can't promise I won't do something even more. Interesting. Mark swayed on his feet. Finally, looking like a man who had his soul ripped out, he nodded weakly. Okay, I'll do it. He stumbled out the door and disappeared into the stormy night. The door closed, leaving me alone with Chloe. She stared at me with an incredibly complex expression, fear, regret, and even a sliver of something she probably didn't recognize herself. She had never seen this side of me. In her eyes, I'd always been the gentle, mild-mannered, almost weak nice guy. Now, that nice guy had become a predator. Ethan, she tried to crawl over and grab my pant leg. I took a step back, avoiding her touch. You want to turn in there to cool off? I asked, pointing to the refrigerator. She shuddered and shook her head frantically. Good. I sat down on the sofa and crossed my legs. Then let's settle our accounts. I pulled out my phone again, but this time it wasn't a video. It was a folder filled with screenshots of bank statements, transaction histories, and text messages. In 3 years of marriage, the total amount of my salary, bonuses, and investment returns that I handed over to you comes to about $175,000. Your salary was about $40,000. Our joint assets should be somewhere north of 200 grand. I looked up at her. But right now, our joint account has less than $5,000 in it. Where did the money go, Chloe? Her face went bone white. You paid $35,000 for your brother's new car. You put a $55,000 down payment on a new house for your parents back home. And every month, you sent your deadbeat brother money to cover his gambling debts. Sometimes $1,000, sometimes $2,000. Did you ever mention any of this to me? I enlarged the screenshots one by one, shoving the phone in her face. It was from the monitoring software I had secretly installed on her phone months ago. I knew everything. She was completely stunned. She thought she had been so clever, so discreet. She had no idea she'd been living in a cage of my own making. You've been spying on me. No. I corrected her, shaking my head. I've been protecting my assets. After all, I'd hate to think the money I worked my ass off for was being used to fill the black hole of your family's finances while you were busy screwing another man. I stood up and walked over to her, looking down at her from above. Chloe, why do you think I came home early on our anniversary? Did you really think I brought that cake just to surprise you? I leaned in close, my voice a demonic whisper in her ear. I'm a hunter, and you two just walked right in my trap. This is my game now, and I make the rules. So, stay on your knees and tell me, where is my money? Just as I finished speaking, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it and put on speaker. A sharp, furious woman's voice cut through the phone. Is this Ethan Carter? This is Mark Thompson's wife. Have you been out messing around with my husband? You son of a bitch. He took my car. You tell him to get his ass back here and answer my calls. I froze for a second, then a slow smile spread across my face. Divine intervention. I pitched my voice to sound wounded and utterly devastated. Mrs. Thompson, you've got it all wrong. I didn't want this to happen. But your husband, he's with my wife, Chloe. They're here. In my house. In my bed. There was dead silence on the other end. It was followed by a shriek that nearly blew out the phone speaker. Address. Give me your address. I glanced at Chloe, whose face was now the color of a sheet, and calmly recited our address. Please hurry, Mrs. Thompson, I added, my voice cracking. I don't know what I'm going to do. After hanging up, I held the phone up for Chloe to see. See that? Our first guest is about to arrive, I said, my smile widening. So what do you think? Should we welcome her with a video, or should we give her a live performance? Chapter 3. The Vengeance Banquet. The rain was still falling, but it had softened from a downpour to a steady drizzle. The doorbell, however, rang with a fury that was more violent than the earlier thunder, as if someone was trying to break the door down. Chloe flinched, instinctively trying to straighten her towel and smooth her hair to appear less disheveled. Don't move, I commanded coldly. Go open the door. Just like that. No, Ethan, please. I'm begging you. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She knew who was on the other side and what was about to happen. Being exposed like this in front of a stranger, especially Mark's wife, was a fate worse than death. Open the door, I repeated, my voice devoid of any emotion, or I'll open it for you. I made a move to stand, and that was enough to send her scrambling to the door. With a trembling hand, she pulled it open. Standing on the porch was a storm of a woman. She was dressed head to toe in designer brands. The rain had dampened her hair, but it did nothing to diminish her aura of absolute authority. This was Mark's wife, Sharon Thompson. Sharon's gaze was like an X-ray. It first scanned the disheveled, tear-streaked Chloe, a sneer of contempt twisting her lips. Then, her eyes moved past her and settled on me, sitting calmly on the sofa, sipping my drink. You're Ethan Carter? Sharon strode in on her high heels, carrying herself as if she owned the place. I nodded and gestured to the opposite couch. Mrs. Thompson, please have a seat. Can I offer you a glass? It's a 2024 Cabernet. Not bad for a recent vintage. She didn't sit. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the room, finally landing on the expensive man's jacket Mark had left crumpled on the floor. Where's my husband? She demanded. He left, I said, swirling the whiskey in my glass. Just before you called, actually. What, he didn't go home? Sharon's face turned to stone. She marched over to Chloe and, without a word, delivered a sharp, ringing slap across her face. Smack! The sound echoed in the quiet room. You shameless whore! Seducing a married man in your own home, with your husband right here. Are you that desperate? Sharon's voice was sharp and venomous. Chloe cradled her cheek, stunned into silence, fresh tears flooding her eyes. I watched the scene with detached amusement, making no move to intervene. It was a beautiful sight, watching them tear each other apart. Mrs. Thompson, calm down, I finally said, playing the part of the long-suffering victim. Hitting her won't solve anything. It takes two to tango, after all. Sharon's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowed in scrutiny. What's that supposed to mean? Are you suggesting my husband is also at fault? Of course. I set my glass down, stood up, and slowly walked toward her. I was a head taller than she was, and as I looked down at her, my presence seemed to overpower her own formidable aura. Mark is my boss. Chloe is my wife. They were in my house, in my bed. You tell me, who's at fault? My voice was quiet, but it carried a chilling weight. Sharon was momentarily speechless. You're a smart woman, Mrs. Thompson, I continued. We're both victims here. Screaming and fighting just makes us look pathetic and doesn't do any real damage to the guilty parties. Don't you agree? Her expression shifted from pure rage to cool calculation. She reassessed me. This man her husband had cuckolded. I clearly wasn't the spineless weakling she had expected. What do you want? She asked. Her tone had lost its hostility, replaced by a note of genuine curiosity. I want to make them pay, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Not just their reputations. I want them to lose. Everything. I took out my phone and opened the folder. Here are some of Mark and Chloe's text messages, along with the audio of their little rendezvous in my home. Oh, and here's the video of Mark after he cooled off in my freezer for 40 minutes, begging for his life. I handed the phone to Sharon. As she scrolled, her face morphed from stony anger to ashen white, finally settling into the eerie calm before a hurricane. Her knuckles were white from gripping the phone. This is enough to make sure he leaves the marriage with nothing, she said, her voice raw. Not enough. I shook my head. Not nearly enough. I took the phone back. Mrs. Thompson, I know Mark wouldn't be where he is today without your family support. I also know that he hasn't exactly kept his hands clean at the office. Sharon's pupils contracted, taking kickbacks from suppliers, using company project funds to cover his personal investment losses. I imagine you've heard whispers of these things, haven't you? My words were like a sledgehammer, striking her right where it hurt. She had suspected some of it, but had chosen to look the other way. She never imagined that I, a seemingly ordinary subordinate, would know the details. I have evidence of some of his transactions, I said casually, delivering my trump card. It's not everything, but it's more than enough for the DA's office to open a white-collar crime investigation. This evidence wasn't something I'd stumbled upon. As a longtime employee, I'd been aware of Mark's dirty dealings for a while. Using my IT skills, I had discreetly collected key emails and transfer records. I never thought I'd use them, but today was a special occasion. Sharon was completely silent. She knew that if I turned this over, Mark wasn't just facing a divorce and unemployment. He was facing prison. You want to team up? She finally asked, her eyes sharp as glass. It's a win-win, I said, holding out my hand. I help you track down all the marital assets he's hidden, giving you the grounds to kick him to the curb and maybe even send him upstate for a few years. In return, I just need one small favor from you. What favor? Your company is bidding on the new South Waterfront Development Project, correct? I asked. She nodded. The project was the company's biggest priority this year. Mark is one of the project leads. He has a copy of the final technical bid proposal. I need you to get it for me. Then, I'm going to accidentally leak it to your biggest competitor. This was my real goal, hitting him where it would hurt the most. I didn't just want Mark to lose his family and his freedom. I wanted him to be the man who single-handedly destroyed his company's biggest project, to be branded a corporate pariah with no chance of ever recovering. Sharon looked at me, a complex mix of emotions in her eyes. She saw my ruthlessness, but she also saw my intelligence. She knew that working with me was her best and only path to getting the maximum return. Fine. After a long silence, she made her decision, taking my outstretched hand in a firm grip. You have a deal. When this is over, you get 30% of whatever money I recover from him. Done, I smiled. Our alliance was forged. Chloe, who had been listening to our entire conversation, had slowly lost all color in her face until she was as pale as a corpse. She finally understood. I wasn't having a breakdown. I was executing a carefully planned, meticulously detailed revenge. From the very beginning, she and Mark were nothing more than pawns on my board. Ethan, she trembled, making one last, desperate appeal for mercy. We were married. You can't do this to me. I turned and looked at her, my face a mask of indifference. Married? That ended the moment I opened the bathroom door. I walked over and threw a document in her face. That's the divorce agreement, I said. I've already signed it. You get nothing. None of my assets are yours to touch. That includes this condo. No, this is our home. It's marital property, she shrieked. No. I shook my head, a demonic smile playing on my lips. You seem to forget. The down payment for this place came from my parents. The deed is in my name only. According to state law, that makes it premarital property. You won't get a single dime. Chloe looked as if she'd been struck by lightning and collapsed to the floor. She had forgotten. She had controlled all my income, thinking she controlled our life together, but she'd overlooked the most critical detail. Sign it, I said, holding out a pen. Sign it, and we can go our separate ways. If you don't, I will hand over all the evidence of you and your family misappropriating my assets to the court. I'll sue you for fraud. When that happens, not only will you be left with nothing, but your precious little brother might end up sharing a cell with Mark. Chloe looked at me, her eyes filled with nothing but absolute despair. She knew she had lost, utterly and completely. With a shaking hand, she took the pen and signed her name at the bottom of the agreement. Outside, the rain had stopped. The main act was about to begin. Chapter 4. The prey strikes back. With my alliance with Sharon in place, the gears of my revenge began to turn with terrifying speed. The next day, Mark was a no-show at the office. The HR department soon received his resignation email, citing a sudden and serious medical condition requiring long-term care. The brand-new BMW X5 was parked in my spot downstairs, the keys and signed title left with the building's concierge. Everything was going according to plan. A man held captive by fear and blackmail is more obedient than any dog. Chloe moved out, too. She left with almost nothing but the clothes on her back. As she was leaving, she gave me a look filled with venom and defiance, as if to say, just you wait, Ethan. I'll make you pay for this. I just gave a contemptuous little smile. The impotent rage of a loser was my new favorite song. I thought things would proceed smoothly from there, that I would just grind them into the dirt without any further trouble. But I had underestimated the fury of a cornered animal. A week later, I was at home, using the intel from Sharon and my own tech skills to trace Mark's hidden offshore accounts, when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 uniformed police officers. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I kept my face impassive. I knew this was coming. Ethan Carter, we've received a report alleging your involvement in an assault and unlawful imprisonment. We need you to come with us to answer some questions. The lead officer's voice was stern. I guessed it. Mark and Chloe had gone to the cops. They must have realized that letting me boil them slowly was a losing game. Their only move was to go for broke and try to get me locked up first. If I was behind bars, all my evidence would be useless. Officers, there must be some kind of misunderstanding, I said, opening the door with a look of pure, innocent confusion. We can clear up any misunderstanding down at the station. They put me in the back of their cruiser. In the interrogation room, I saw Mark's medical report and Chloe's tearful signed statement. They painted me as a violent maniac who had snapped after finding out about their affair. They claimed I beat Mark senseless and then locked him in a freezer for an hour, causing him severe physical and psychological trauma. They'd even roped in Chloe's parents and brother as witnesses, who all swore that I had a history of domestic abuse. Just like that, I was transformed from the victim into a brutal abuser. The cops interrogating me were looking at me with suspicion and hostility. Mr. Carter, it's better to cooperate. Your wife and the victim have both given their statements. I looked at them, my face a perfect mask of bewildered anguish. "Officers, they're lying." I shot to my feet, my voice thick with emotion. "I caught them having an affair, and now they're trying to frame me so they can keep the money they stole." "Do you have any proof that you didn't assault him, that you didn't lock him in that freezer?" the officer pressed. I feigned helplessness, slumping back in my chair. "No, it was just the three of us. How can I prove anything?" Seeing my distress, the two officers exchanged a look that said they had their man. Right on cue, the door opened, and my lawyer walked in, a legal shark named Mr. Davies, hired by Sharon. "Officers, I'm here to represent my client. We'll be posting bail. Furthermore, we have new evidence to submit regarding this case," Davies said, his tone calm and professional. "New evidence?" Davies nodded, took out his phone, and played a video. The lighting in the video was dim, but it clearly showed Mark, completely naked, sobbing on my living room floor. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm an animal. I seduced your wife. I'm so sorry. Please let me go. I'll give you anything you want." The video was short, but it was damning. That was not the plea of an assault victim. It was the confession of a guilty man begging for forgiveness. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The two cops looked utterly bewildered. Where did this come from?" "My client recorded it accidentally in a moment of extreme emotional distress," Davies said, adjusting his glasses. "Additionally, my client never imprisoned Mr. Thompson in a refrigerator. They had an argument, and Mr. Thompson, in a panic, hid inside it himself, and the door became stuck. We have a copy of the owner's manual for that particular model. It has a known design flaw with the latching mechanism." Davies then produced a printed product manual, one that I had spent all night fabricating in Photoshop. It was flawless. The officers stared at each other. The entire case had just been turned on its head. "Furthermore," Davies continued, dropping his final bomb, "my client would like to file a report of his own." "What kind of report?" "A report against Mark Thompson for embezzlement and accepting bribes, and against Chloe Mitchell and her family for felony fraud and misappropriation of marital assets." Davies placed a thick binder on the table. "Here is some of the preliminary evidence we've gathered. It includes bank records of kickbacks Mr. Thompson received and a detailed accounting of how Chloe Mitchell transferred over $100,000 of my client's income to her family members." If the video had flipped the script, this binder burned the whole theater down. The officers' faces were grim. They realized this wasn't a simple domestic dispute anymore. This was a major, white-collar criminal case. Mark and Chloe never saw it coming. Their desperate counterattack, meant to be my undoing, had instead become the express train sending them straight to hell. I walked out of the police station a free man that same afternoon. Mark and Chloe, on the other hand, were now the subjects of a criminal investigation for filing a false report, embezzlement, and fraud. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, I saw them across the street, huddled with their lawyer, looking like two stray dogs caught in a storm. Their faces were ashen. They saw me too. I gave them a small smile and mouthed two words: "Game over." They never realized that from the moment I decided on revenge, I had planned for every possibility, including their last-ditch effort to frame me. In fact, I had counted on it. I wanted them to call the police. I wanted to be brought in, because I knew that the only way to deliver the final, inescapable, killing blow was to present my evidence in the one place they thought they could win. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The real game was just heating up. I got in the car Sharon had sent for me. She was already inside, and she handed me a flash drive. She had gotten me what I needed, the technical bid proposal for the South Waterfront project. "Nice work," she said. "The rest is up to you." I plugged the drive into my laptop. "Don't worry," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard, a confident smile on my face. "I'm about to send his former company a very special present." I quickly drafted an anonymous email and attached the file. With a single click, I sent the confidential bid to Mark's company's biggest rival. The moment I hit send, I could almost hear the sound of their corporate empire beginning to crumble. Then my phone buzzed. It was an anonymous text message. "You think you won? You mess with the wrong people, Ethan. Watch your back, and watch out for your parents." My pupils contracted to pinpricks. My parents. They were my only weakness, my only boundary. They dared to threaten my family. A wave of rage, blacker and more violent than anything I had felt that first night, surged up from the depths of my soul. Chapter 5. The Final Judgment. That text message was a poison blade aimed directly at my heart. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents' number. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before my mother answered, her voice thick and strained. "Hello, Ethan. Mom, are you okay? Is Dad okay?" We're fine. Don't you worry," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "We just had some visitors. A few rough-looking young men. Said you owed them money. Your father tried to argue with them, and they pushed him. He fell and hit his head, got a little cut. We're at the clinic in town now, getting it looked at. It's nothing serious. Honey, don't you worry." Nothing serious? They had put their hands on my father. I could picture it perfectly. My quiet, decent parents, terrified and helpless against a group of thugs. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Mark, Chloe, I had thought sending them to prison, ruining their lives, would be enough. I was wrong. For scum like them, people with no bottom line, the law was not a punishment. It was a slap on the wrist. They had crossed my final line. And for that, I was going to show them what hell really looked like. Mom, don't be scared. I'm on my way home right now. Just try to remember what they looked like. They're not getting away with this. I hung up, the last bit of warmth draining from my body, replaced by a cold, murderous calm. Sharon, sitting across from me in the car, had heard the whole conversation. Her expression was grim. That was Mark. He's under investigation, and he's desperate. He knows he can't get to you, so he went after your family. He's going to regret that, I said through gritted teeth. What do you need? She asked. She knew we were in this together now. A threat to my family was a threat to our entire plan. I need the names of those thugs. And I want Mark's current location updated in real time. My voice was terrifyingly calm. Sharon's resources were impressive. In less than 30 minutes, the profiles of the local thugs and Mark's live GPS location were on my phone. He was holed up in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city with Chloe and her gambling addict brother, Kyle. So, they knew the police were closing in and they were planning their next move. Maybe they were getting ready to flee the country. Or maybe they thought they could use my parents as a bargaining chip. I didn't call the police. This time, I wasn't going to let the system handle it. This was going to be a private affair. My judgment, my rules. I got in my car and drove, alone, toward the abandoned factory. I cranked up a classical symphony on the stereo, the powerful music swelling like the overture to my final act of vengeance. Dusk was settling as I parked my car a safe distance away and slipped into the decaying industrial park. The factory smelled of rust and decay. Dim light filtered through grimy, broken windows. It didn't take me long to hear angry voices. "Are you sure this Carter guy is going to pay up? We roughed up his old man. What if he just calls the cops?" That was Kyle, Chloe's brother. "What's he going to do? He's more scared of this getting out than we are." Mark's voice was trying for bravado, but failing. "We have his parents. That's our ace in the hole. Once we get the money, we're gone. Head to Southeast Asia, lay low for a while. But the police are already looking at your accounts," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "Shut up, you bitch." Mark roared. "None of this would have happened if it wasn't for you. After I get the money, you're the first one I'm getting rid of." I listened from the shadows, a cold smile on my face. Pathetic. Faced with their own destruction, all they could do was turn on each other. I decided the show had gone on long enough. I stepped out of the darkness. "You can save yourself the trouble," my voice echoed in the cavernous space. "None of you are walking out of here tonight." All three of them jumped as if they'd seen a ghost. "Ethan, how did you find us?" Mark stammered, stumbling backward. Kyle reflexively grabbed a steel pipe, holding it out threateningly. "You stay back, or else." Only Chloe stood frozen, staring at me, her eyes completely dead. I ignored them, calmly opening the toolbox I brought with me. Inside, there were no knives, no guns, just a coil of rope, a lighter, several bottles of high-proof rubbing alcohol, and my phone, which I plugged into a large portable speaker. "You all like to play games, right?" I said, pulling on a pair of leather gloves and smiling at them. "Tonight, I'm going to play one with you." I hit play on my phone. Instantly, the speaker blasted Mark's pig-like squeals from the bathroom, followed by the desperate, muffled thuds of him trying to escape the freezer. The sound was amplified to a deafening volume, creating a horrifying surround sound experience in the empty factory. "No! Turn it off! Turn it off!" Mark clapped his hands over his ears, his mind instantly shattering. The terror of that night was a nightmare he would never escape. While he was distracted, I moved like a predator. I shot forward and kicked Kyle squarely in the knee. He screamed and dropped to the ground, the pipe clattering away. A single, precise chop to the back of his neck, and he was unconscious. With the trash taken care of, I walked slowly toward the terrified, paralyzed figures of Mark and Chloe. I was just going to let you go to prison," I said, methodically pouring the alcohol on the concrete floor, creating a large circle around them. "But you should never, ever have touched my parents." I flicked the lighter, a small blue flame dancing on my fingertip. "I've changed my mind." I tossed the lighter into the circle of alcohol. Whoosh! A wall of blue flame erupted, trapping the three of them in a ring of fire. The intense heat warped the air and cooked their terror. Help! He's trying to kill us." They screamed, beating uselessly against the flames. I stood back and watched their frantic dance, as if I were enjoying a fireworks display. I wasn't going to burn them to death. That would be too easy. I just wanted to break their minds, to let them stew in their own absolute terror and despair while they waited for the real judgment to arrive. The fire and smoke soon attracted attention. In the distance, I heard the approaching sirens of police cars and fire trucks. I looked at the three pathetic figures in the circle of fire, now nearly catatonic with fear. I packed up my things and, before the first responders arrived, slipped out a back exit, a ghost in the night. I sent one final text to Sharon. "It's done." The end was predictable. Mark, Chloe, and Kyle, facing charges of attempted kidnapping, extortion, and assault, on top of the ironclad evidence of embezzlement and fraud, were all sentenced to more than 10 years in prison. Mark's former company, having lost the South Waterfront bid due to the leak, suffered hundreds of millions in losses. The corruption scandal triggered a corporate meltdown, leading to a complete overhaul of its executive leadership. And me, throughout the entire ordeal, I remained a victim, a poor man betrayed by his wife and boss, whose family was threatened by criminals, who had, by sheer wit and a little luck, cleared his name and brought the villains to justice. As for the accidental fire at the factory, with no trace of my presence, the official cause was determined to be suspects attempting to destroy evidence. The dust settled. A few months later, my dad had fully recovered. I moved both my parents to the city, using the consulting fee Sharon had paid me to buy them a large condo in the nicest part of town. One day, I saw Chloe on a TV news report about prison sentences. She was in a prison jumpsuit, her head shaved, her face gaunt, and her eyes hollow. All her former radiance was gone. Through the screen, it felt like she was looking right at me. There was no hatred left in her eyes, only a vast, empty landscape of regret. I calmly changed the channel. To me, she and Mark were just something disgusting I had stepped in. Now my shoes were clean. I turned off the TV and walked out onto the balcony. The sun was shining. The city below was bustling with life. I took a deep breath. The air was fresh, clean, with no lingering stench of betrayal. The storm was over. For me, the sky was finally clear. As for the darkness, the cold-blooded revenge, I decided to leave all that behind, forever buried with the pushover husband in that 0-degree freezer.